Welcome into the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm Ethan Skolnick. Make sure you go to 5reasonsports.com for all your latest Miami Heat, Miami Dolphins, Miami Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, Miami Marlins, and soccer news. Also, check out the other podcasts in our network. 3 Yards Per Carry is actually recording as we speak. Ballscast, of course, Light Skinned Opinions. You'll hear more about that during this episode. 5 Rings Canes had a new episode yesterday, leading up to the Canes game against FSU, Cinco Razones, and Fantasy on 5. Before we get to today's episode, though, I want to tell you about one of the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is BetDSI. I should have gone to BetDSI tonight because the Heat were only, I think, given 5 points tonight. They ended up covering pretty comfortably, but you can bet on just about anything, and you can do it live also. So if you're not right at the beginning of the game, bet at halftime. Go to BetDSI.com. Use the promo code 5101. That's 5101. And like I said, you can bet on virtually anything. If you didn't get in the futures on the Heat, you can certainly bet game to game. We've got Dolphins Jets, which nobody wants to see on Sunday, and Heat Rockets, which I think everybody at this stage wants to see. And now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back here on 5 on the Floor. No Alphonse Sidney today. He's wasted in New Orleans. No Alex Toledo. Same deal. So we've got the next best thing. We're bringing on the usual co-host for Alphonse Sidney on our light-skinned opinions. Christopher Mattox joins us today. Chris, thanks for doing it.
My pleasure, man. Glad to be here.
So we both just watched this win. The Heat sweep back-to-back against the Atlanta Hawks. A little bit easier tonight with no Trae Young from the very beginning. We're going to go through 5 points, though, as the Heat advance to 4-1. Let's just start with Kendrick Nunn. We had a conversation with Kendrick Nunn. Yeah, at Media Day. 28 points tonight, Chris, and more points by an undrafted free agent in his first 5 games than anybody in history. The most points in the first 5 games of a career since Kevin Durant. He was undrafted. Yes. They signed him on the last day of the season. I know there's a lot of talk about him and off-the-court stuff and everything else. We can touch on that at some point here. But just on the court, what are we watching?
He has grown man game. What has been so impressive about this little run he's having is that he's doing all of it within the flow of the offense. And when he does decide to go for his own, it doesn't look out of place. It doesn't look forced. And somehow at the end of the night, without looking like he's really being super aggressive, he's got 28 points. He takes perfect advantage of his opportunities. His pull-up game is nice. He attacks. He gets to the free throw line. But all of it looks like it's supposed to be happening. You know, it looks so natural.
It does. It's the calmness that Eric Spoelstra's talked about, right? Like nothing is forced. The hesitation, dribble. It's like he gets other guys to move faster than him, which for a rookie is kind of a ridiculous skill for him to have at this stage. And then the 3-point shooting. You know, I noticed this when I was out at Summer League in Las Vegas. He doesn't need much space. Like there are some guys who to pull up, they'll feel like they need to create a certain amount of space. Like even Tyler Herro does that to a certain degree. Kendrick Nunn needs no space. Like it's just if he's going to launch, he's going to launch. But his feet are set and he's in rhythm. Like the only issue tonight was some turnovers late. But other than that, like when I talked to him before the game the other night, Chris, I said, okay, you're on the scouting report now. Now this was before the first Atlanta game. Have you noticed anything different? And he says, really not yet. And I said to him, I kind of led the subject here a little bit. I said, well, it just doesn't seem like you have a clear weakness. Like there are a lot of players that have really strong strengths, but they have some kind of hole. I don't know that Kendrick Nunn does everything perfectly, but he doesn't do anything poorly. So I don't really know what they would take away. When I kind of mentioned that to him, he nodded and smiled. I mean, we saw Jeremy Lin have a month, right? We've seen a lot of guys in the NBA have a month. I don't
have a moment.
What's going to stop this?
Well, I don't think it's a moment because, especially in tonight's game, I thought it was pretty evident. Jimmy is facilitating his game so well. I think the NBA is still a little shook about Kendrick Nunn, primarily when he's on the court with Jimmy Butler. Your mind, your defensive scheme, everything is on. We got to make sure we're stopping Jimmy. And Jimmy has been great at facilitating. He's getting the ball where it needs to be, and tonight he did that very well. And I think that says something about who Jimmy Butler is too, because he's not out also dominating the ball either. And that, the two of them playing together is going to make it very hard for other teams to do anything about it, because you're either going to give some space to Jimmy, or you got to let it keep playing the way it's been, where the ball is moving and Kendrick Nunn is catching on the weak side and attacking, or he's getting shots up off the dribble. Right now, the combination of players, I think, is going to help his moment sustain. Like, who was on the court with Jeremy Lin when Jeremy Lin was going crazy? Like, who was there to help,
right.
lengthen it or extend the run? Here there are players who can. This can go for a while. The ball he doesn't have to dominate. It doesn't have to be in his hands for him to score, and that's going to help him.
Well, I didn't think he played that well the other night. Like, I actually thought that was the poorest game I've seen him play, going all the way back to Summer League, and he ended up with 17. Other guys have bad games. Like, again, when Jeremy Lin had a bad game here in Miami, when Chalmers and Norris Cole basically ended Linsanity, that was a bad game. Like, he couldn't dribble. They were on him and they wanted to be, because they were tired of hearing about it, but they were on him from the moment he came out of the tunnel. I don't see what you take away from him necessarily. And that gets kind of our point too today. You mentioned Jimmy Butler, and people I think around the NBA are going to look at this stat line and not understand it. Not
at all.
Right? You
had to watch the game you had to watch it to really see it. I don't even think I know his plus minus was crazy. I heard during the game something like plus 20 when he was on the court, but that was one of the rare times where you could really see a plus minus influence, and it wasn't because of the points. Like, you could see that he was having an impact on the game just by being on the court and moving the ball. It was great to watch.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's why I think people around the NBA are going to look at this and be like, okay, we thought Jimmy Butler had to go score in Miami for them to be successful. Yeah. And we've seen the first 3 games, he wasn't on the floor at all. And the last 2 games, he had a 12-point first quarter and then really took a back seat the rest of the game. And then today, from an offensive standpoint, as far as looking at the basket, I didn't even know he was on the floor in that regard. It was everything else. And, Eric Spoelstra's talked about this. He's a basketball player. I think, they have viewed him from the very beginning as kind of being LeBron light. Like, they view him as somebody that they can run offense through, but that he's not necessarily going to have to take over all the time. But I think the difference is, whenever LeBron did that, there would be this instant criticism, Chris. Like, okay, because LeBron needs to be more aggressive. I don't think with the rookies, I think for Jimmy, the people are looking at this as unselfishness. They're like, okay, he's letting his rookies flourish. He's proving he's a good teammate after all those other questions. I mean, Jimmy as a teammate is one of the most talked about things in the sport. I mean, he's minding his own business in Miami, and he gets thrown in the middle of the Embiid town thing, right? Like, like he's living his best life, and and he said today,
and that gives the impression like Jimmy was up there egging people on to fight, and all of a sudden now they're like, look, we're finally doing it.
Oh, exactly.
And he's down here just being a fantastic mentor superstar.
Yeah, he doesn't have to force anything with this group. Look, there will be times that he's going to have to turn it on in the fourth quarter, but for right now, there's just no need to do it. And when you've got 2 rookies that are giving you, between 42 and 50 points, or you've got Goran Dragic coming off the bench and doing what he's doing. I mean, no Justice Winslow tonight, and I know Justice is such a lightning rod that people say, oh, they didn't need him. There are games they're going to need Justice Winslow from a plus minus standpoint, defensive standpoint, from a ball handling and playmaking standpoint. But when Jimmy is doing a lot of that stuff, it's not as necessary. And I think we've seen this now, Chris, twice. No Jimmy Butler in the first game of the season, so Justice Winslow did all of it. Tonight, no Justice Winslow, so Jimmy Butler does all of it. And I just think there's a real comfort level with it. And the idea that Jimmy Butler would step aside, not just for a rookie who was drafted 13th overall, but for an undrafted free agent who signed in the last
exactly.
If you're outside of Miami right now, and I'm noticing this with national guys that I sit next to at games, guys like Bobby Marks and Mark Stein, Howard Beck, who've been down there, like they don't know what they're watching because they haven't been following this like us through the preseason, but everybody comes away impressed. And I think it starts with Jimmy, but it's not all about Jimmy.
No, not at all. I wanted to say while you were saying that when I was watching Jimmy Butler play tonight, it looked like Justice Winslow at prime. It looked like if when Justice is at his best in terms of game impact, not his best scoring, not his best shooting, but in terms of just being like his best basketball playing self, it would look like how Jimmy looked tonight. I feel like that ability to get the bucket when I need to, but to also just be a great cog in the wheel on the court. And that to me has been super impressive. Just the way everybody, all of the pieces seem to fit. And for a while, as you know, Heat fans, we've been looking at teams where sometimes the pieces fit a little bit, but there was one out of place. Sometimes, you know, we could put a little grease on the wheel for a couple of weeks and things will look smooth, but then eventually it grinds down. This group looks very fluid.
They do, and we're going to get to that a little later with the ball movement, which I haven't seen ball movement like that since 2012, 2013. Which I mean, they had 3 Hall of Famers on the floor, 4 Hall of Famers on the floor actually in the fourth in that season after Ray Allen came on. But you know, one other thing with Jimmy is that I think this is really going to preserve him. We talk about the minutes that he played under Tom Thibodeau. And I think sometimes that's overstated because if you actually look at Jimmy's total minutes for his career at this stage, they're not as big as some other guys because he didn't play as much the first couple seasons. But the fact that he's going to be able to go into cruise control in some games and kind of just do what's necessary instead of having to expend all of that energy, which a lot of people thought he would have to because they're like, well, he's not in Philadelphia with Embiid and Simmons, right? He's not in Minnesota with Towns and Wiggins. Like he's going to be playing with a bunch of unproven guys. But so far, we've seen him been able to sort of get into the flow. He hasn't had to play crazy minutes. I think they can keep his minutes into sort of the low to mid 30s instead of the high 30s, and that will keep him fresh later in the season. And with all of this depth, and we haven't even really we haven't seen James Johnson except on the bench tonight, and we'll see what happens with Dion. With all of this depth, I just don't think it's going to be as necessary for him. All right, let's get to number 3 here, and that is the ball movement. And there were some instances in the fourth quarter, Chris, where there were some clips from the Atlanta game the other night where all 5 guys are touching it within 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 seconds. It looks like this team has played together forever. And right? And I loved how the pieces fit, and I've been pounding the table on a 3 seed on this team for a couple months, but I didn't think it would look like this quickly. I mean, like you said, last year, and I know that was basically just the Dwayne Wade celebratory season, but last year, like they were in game 80 and didn't know where they were going in certain stretches of the game.
Exactly.
I don't think Eric knew. What do you see that? Are they running anything different, or is this just that again puzzle pieces fit?
One of the things that I've always, as a Heat fan, that I've always called for, and I think sometimes I don't know if it's Spolstra or whatever, but sometimes I just want to see us run plays. And so what I think we see a lot of, like there's a lot of great basketball IQ and skill on the floor. Bam is a great passer. Myers Leonard, great passer, understands the game. So that's automatically going to help the flow of it all. But a lot of times you're seeing not deliberate, that has like a bad connotation, but you're seeing like plays being run. Like things are happening to where, Silva is cutting right down the middle of the paint, perfect pass, layup. Like that's like, if you were a high school coach, you would go crazy with excitement and joy to see that happen. And they're running it, and we're seeing more of those plays a game. Think if you get like 5 or 6 layups off good, crisp passing a game, that's 10 to 12 points where we win tonight by like 12 points a game. Like you win games off that. And so it's good to see. And then, of course, everyone is unselfish. I mean, sometimes I'm nervous with the overpassing. I feel like, oh my gosh, but it's been perfect.
Well,
so
Chris,
far,
there was a clip, the clip that was circulating off the Hawks game the other night. There was an overpass in it. All 5 guys touched it. But Jimmy basically had the ball under the basket, and maybe part of it was camera angle, but it looked like Jimmy could have just laid it up and instead sent it to the corner to Herro, who sent it back out to Nunn. And the best part of that clip was that Herro was all the way back down the court, not even looking at the basket or Kendrick Nunn because he knew it was in. And we saw a couple of those sequences tonight and the cuts tonight. And some of it, I think, is set plays, but some of this is Warriors-esque. And I'm not talking about the Warriors. Season. where the Warriors, it was just all read and react. Like I feel
Mhm.
like, there's a set play, but essentially they don't care who brings it up.
That's a better
That the other night. And then Tyler Herro, Kendrick Nunn just have this feel for the game. I also think it helps. Nunn and Herro played 7 games together in Summer League in the backcourt.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that also.
They're very used to playing together. Very used to. But I think that's a better what I mean to say, instead of like running plays. That's what I like I hate the connotation of it, but you called it like the read and react is an offense. Like you're seeing an offense play out, And it's funny you mentioned the Warriors. I was watching the game with my brother. My brother said the same thing. He was like, I don't want to sound crazy, but this looks like the Warriors. Nobody wants to speak that kind of blasphemy in basketball, but they do. The understanding of when to cut, when to screen, how to play off of each other. It's very good to watch, and you have a lot of players who are willing to play like that. When I coach youth sports, you see all the different teams. You could come across a team with a bunch of crappy kids on it, but if they ran that read and react offense and they understood it, they're going to give you trouble. It's hard to guard backdoor cuts. It's hard to when a guy is posting up that dribble handoff and he rolls off the screen. All of that stuff is forcing the defense to have to think consistently. And I think when you saw the Hawks tonight, there were several times where the Hawks, multiple players on the court on defense were like, okay, I'm not thinking through this entire possession. I made it through like 3 movements, and then I'm done. And then we get 2 more passes, and you get a layup because somebody's wide open.
Well, Chris, how much of the fact that, because it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think it's mentally exhausting as well as sort of physically exhausting to defend that. And now we've seen consistently that the Heat have dominated the last stretch of fourth quarters, with the exception, obviously of that Minnesota game where Wiggins just got off. But we've seen in the last 2 Atlanta games. We saw it in the opener against Memphis. People forget they were down 1 going into the fourth and blew that thing open in the fourth. And I feel like some of that is just it's exhausting. It's a team coming at you with a ton of depth and ball movement. And at a certain point, the players on the floor, particularly if they played 30 to 35 minutes, you just don't want to do it anymore. Like, are you just not mentally into it anymore? And I'm just, that's the part I'm stunned about. And that's the other reason why I just don't see Dion Waiters ever getting on the floor here, because he's antithetical to this whole idea of ball movement. And so when people talk about why Dion's gone, look, I think part of it obviously was the conditioning, but he was in better condition. I think part of it is the silliness on the bench and the silliness on Instagram. But I think a lot of it is they just made a conscious decision. We have guys who know how to play who aren't going to get in the way. We don't really need Dion Waiters. And it almost feels to me now, Chris, like they were looking for excuses to sort of shelve him, because I don't know where his skill set, which I appreciate on its own merits, would even fit with this group.
It doesn't fit. And that's I was thinking the same thing watching the game. It's going to be impossible. And it's one of those terrible things. And like, if you're a sports purist, some people feel like you should never lose your spot to injury, or never lose your spot to, sometimes things you can't control. And Dion came back healthy, but he's been injured. And in the time that he's been away, the team has gotten used to figuring out ways to function without him. And what we have now is a group of players that was put together without him in mind. Like, you can tell that this group was put together and they didn't even think about Dion fitting in with this group, because he doesn't play that way. He's a ball stopper. Right now he's kind of looking like Carmelo in a lower tier Carmelo type situation. Like, where do you put him in with this unit, and what does he do out there? And that's a sad thing, because you hate to see it. I mean, a guy works his tail off. You say, I'm not in shape. He tries to come back in better shape, but then sometimes the window passes you. And I think it's past Dion. And then I don't think the fans would react well. Who are you putting on the bench? Who are you going to sit down? Whose minutes are you going to cut? When I kind of thought it was going to be Tyler. I thought, okay, they're going to get him some starts early in the season. When he was starting, it was kind of a surprise. I'm like, okay, Dion will come back from suspension, and then, he'll go back to his back seat. But I don't see that happening, because Tyler Herro is a shooter. Right. He's got the confidence of, Doc Holliday as a trigger man. He's going to let that thing go. And, I mean, the fans love it. He's young. Everybody likes it. It's just a terrible like confluence of events for Dion.
Well, it would be a terrible message, Chris. If honestly, at this point, right? I mean, if you're going to take Tyler Herro off the floor after what he's shown, I just don't think it's possible. And with Kendrick Nunn, the same thing. I mean, they're just and you're not pulling Goran Dragic off the floor. Winslow's going to play, and you've got Jimmy. I mean, you've got your 5 perimeters. In the fourth game of the season, they all played exactly 30 minutes. You know, there's just no space for Dion except obviously being traded. I think James Johnson, there is some room to guard certain fours,
definitely,
and maybe even some small ball 5s. But I just don't see it with Dion Waiters. Last 2 parts of our episode in a second, but first I want to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. Go to onecalllegal.com. That's spelled out ONE, calllegal.com. They've got someone there 24 hours a day. We actually share an office with them in North Miami. Great people at the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm, and they handle everything. They handle car accidents, slip and falls, personal injury, and also traffic tickets. So onecalllegal.com, the Seltzer Mayberg Law Firm. All right, let's get to part 4 here. Ethan Skolnick with Chris Mattox. First, Chris, before we go forward, I need a word of the day because on LSO you do a word of the day, and I feel like our audience has been deprived of that. Well, what's the word of the day for the Heat?
Oh man, the word of the day. How about unison?
I like that.
Tonight we saw a lot of
Can
players.
you say that sentence?
Tonight the offense and the players moved in unison. There we go. A little boo-boo SAT word for you, like level 1.
Level 1, yeah. I don't even know that's level 1. That's like level 0.5. But we appreciate it. You'll get. You know what? You must think that Alf is the intellectual, not me, because you use better material than that on Light Skin Opinions. So check out the Light Skin Opinions podcast.
Well, I wasn't prepared. I had to pull that one off the top of the head real quick. You know, I wasn't prepared.
Well, you're a teacher too, so I know everything's got to be a lesson plan. I get it. But all right, let's go. Let's get it. We'll get to the syllabus. Now we're going to go to the last 2 points here that we want to get to. Which is Bam and the Bigs, number 4 tonight.
Yes.
Bam Adebayo looked like he was headed for a triple-double in the first half. It didn't finish that way, but he ended up with 7 assists, which is 2 seasons for his predecessor, Hassan Whiteside. I feel vindicated in a lot of different ways here because I spent pretty much the last 2 seasons arguing with Whiteside stans who kept telling me about huge rebound numbers and all this. And I kept saying, is he going to switch out on a shooter? Is he going to make a pass to a cutter? Is he going to do any of those kind of things?
That's the difference.
I'm not seeing anything that Bam Adebayo doesn't do well. Like to me, the only thing that's keeping him from an all-star appearance this year is just overall touches. Like I think a lot of the numbers are going to be there. I mean, to me, the first 5 games for him could not have, in this role, could not have gone better.
They could not have gone better. I think, bear with me here for a second. Like, I think Bam's game might have owe a lot to the success that Draymond has had. Like, Draymond has made it a thing in the NBA now, like a player type, to be a guy who is multi-tooled. And I might only give you 15, 16 points, but that plus the steals, the blocks, the rebounds, the assists, obviously, the calming influence on the court, all of that adds up to an all-star level game. And so tonight, I mean, everybody, we said the same thing about Jimmy. Bam is also facilitating. He's willing to make the extra pass. He's always been a hustler. He's trying to tip everything. If you don't securely grab a rebound, Bam is trying to tip it. And tonight, I think I saw him get like 2 offensive rebounds like that. One of them, he put it up, missed it again, got it back, and it ended up going to the free throw line. So all of those things help, and all of those things give like an energy and a vibe to the team that you absolutely were not getting from Whiteside. I didn't know that Whiteside had fans that were like enough to even argue with. Like,
they do, and then there's the same people that hated Spoelstra and the same people who hate Winslow. And thought Bam was overrated. It's a strange mix. I sort of felt like if you were still supporting Whiteside over Bam at this stage, you're one of those people I couldn't listen to about basketball because it's just clear. You're just stat watching. I mean, that's it. And the thing is, it's not like Bam wasn't going to put up stats if he got the opportunity to do it, but he was going to do everything else. You mentioned the deflections. The NBA is tracking that this year, and I saw that through the first 4 games, Bam I think was 4th in the league in that stat. But the one thing we got to get to, because Reggie Miller apparently didn't think it was important because he was talking about his Halloween costume. Bam Adebayo hit a 3 from the corner.
Yeah.
And he's been working with Chris Bosh, and like to me, this is the final frontier. Like if Bam can not even the threes, but just jumpers, that changes the whole equation for the Heat if he does that.
I noticed tonight. I don't know if it was just like Atlanta's defensive strategy, but they were sagging off him a lot in the mid range. Like he was catching the ball with space a lot at like 15 feet. And sometimes 1 or 2 times, you know, he went for like a little floater. But when he pulls up for the little short midi, he's got his form is solid. I don't think any of it is an issue where you got to like build a jump shot for Bam Adebayo. He's just got to get more comfortable. And I think a similar skill set, the first couple games of the season when he would get the ball right off the rim and go, a couple of times, you know, he got a little out of control. He turned it over. I haven't seen that the last couple games. And he's been handling the ball a fair amount. Getting the ball up, getting it initiated, even if it just leads into a dribble handoff real quick and then some other action starts. The ability to get the ball off the rim and go. Alex Leto brought it up. He tweeted it, I think sometime this week. The pace, like it adds to the pace of the game. And when he gets the ball off and he goes, and now everybody is moving, and then everybody just goes right into, you know, the read and react stuff that we've talked about. You got a problem there, and you got a team that's young and fast and moving, and I think that fits Miami. You know what I mean? Like it fits our team.
No, it does. And a couple of things on that. One, you know, Bam told me at training camp, he's like, I want to have 5 runners on the floor at all times, and people would think I'm the guy who won't. So he's got to be the 5th one. But the other thing, you mentioned sagging off of him. They're going to do more of that because I think the whole idea of that is that he's such a good passer and a willing passer that they're going to try to take away those passing lanes from him. So I think he is going to get a little bit more space. And that's where if he can start to make that 10 to 15-foot jumper consistently and rise up and take it, like I said, there's nothing wrong with his form. Like even at the free throw line when he misses, it's not bad form. Like sometimes Justice's form will look sloppy. Bam's form doesn't look sloppy. It's just sometimes it'll roll out. But he has enough arc on the ball. I think his feet are set. He seems to be in the right position. It's just a question of taking it. I do think the fact that he's modeling himself after Bosh tells you a lot. The other bigs tonight, you know, Kelly had some struggles. He's been a little up and down. He's had really good moments this season, really not. Myers Leonard still struggles defensively, but he was their top plus player tonight.
Well,
you know, I thought he played well, not just the points.
I liked his game a lot tonight too, and I was watching him specifically because I know the talk has been like his defense. 1 or 2 times a night, he just got caught out there in some bad rotations. You know, like a couple times, I think Tyler hung him out to dry one time, got burned around, went right around him and got a bucket out of it. And he's trying out there, which is what you want. Like, if you got a good, solid team defense, and that's where Miami Heat basketball has always been, as much as we talk about individual defenders, they're great, and Spoelstra is great at teaching, you know, the scramble and the rotation. And when we get it together and when everybody is fit and can help, you know, we can cover for a guy like Myers Leonard. And he's trying out there. He's moving his feet. He's going to get beat. I mean, he's 7 foot tall. Like, you know, everybody can't beat Bam Adebayo. And then unless you're just going to play all smalls, which we have experimented with before in Miami, I think we kind of initiated small ball in the league, like for real. You know, if you're going to have a big on the court, sometimes you're going to have to deal with that. Like, and the way the game is, Atlanta's bigs are all out around the, you know, on the wing and perimeter anyway. But he was shooting the ball tonight, and he filled in very nicely for what you would like to see from Olynyk. It's like we got players with some duplicate skill sets, but not in a bad way. And
I feel like last year was a bad way, Chris. I think that's the difference. I feel like there's overlapping skill sets where guys can cover for other guys, whereas last year was like it felt like they were just throwing out 6 small guards. You know, it's like Tyler Johnson, Rodney Magruder. You know, when Dion came back, it's just. But this year, you're right. I mean, it's like the games they've gotten it from Myers, they haven't gotten it from Kelly, and vice versa. And you know, no Derek Jones Jr. still, right? James Johnson not available, so it does change some things a little bit. Duncan Robinson got the start tonight, but wasn't, you know, a big factor. They just have a lot of different places that they can go. I thought Myers was fine tonight.
Let me ask you a question, Ethan, because similar to what we talked about with Dion, say James Johnson, he comes back, he gets himself in condition, whatever he's got to do. I mean, where does he fit? Is it Derrick Jones Jr. who when he gets healthy, he's got to take a back seat? Is it Kelly? Is it because Spoelstra, I think right now he's got a nice thing going. But say, some people come back, and now what do you do? Is he in the same position as Dion, where it's kind of like the odd man out?
I don't think it is. I'll tell you what, a couple things. First thing, I think they feel generally James Johnson's attitude's better. I saw him on the bench tonight, and he was into it. I do think that matters to them. But also, from a skill set standpoint, he does some things the other bigs don't do. So, in other words, you can throw him on. Like, I think in the game against Milwaukee, against Giannis, he would have been useful. There are certain games, I think there are minutes for him when you need a more physical guy in the front court, and maybe a more physical guy in a small ball situation where I think he's going to play. He's never been a knockdown three-point shooter. He went through one stretch a couple years ago where he was pretty good, but I don't think that's what they're expecting. And I don't think they really are leaning on him for ball handling anymore because they don't need it. But I do think from a defensive standpoint, if he just gives them that, and I think it's going to be situational with him and Derrick Jones Jr. and Myers Leonard. I think Kelly's going to play most games, pretty consistent minutes. But we even saw last year, Kelly had 3 DNPs. So I just think they feel they have options, but I think James Johnson will work his way in. Let's get to the fifth one here, and this is really more bigger picture. They play Houston on Sunday. We saw them play Houston in the preseason, and Nunn dropped 40. It is, and here's my question for you, Chris, because you follow this too. I feel like we've sort of, this market is sort of snuck up on everybody again from a basketball perspective. Like, this is like the opposite of the big three where it was all hype and then everybody kind of beating them down. This year, outside of this market, there was no hype. They beat Houston on Sunday before they go on that road trip. Everybody's going to be talking about this team.
Yeah.
Are they worthy of it?
If they beat Houston on Sunday, they definitely are. Because that would be 2 of the best 5 players in the league. Giannis at home, and then you bring it in Russ and James Harden. Well, 3 of the top 7, 8 players in the league. If you do that, the nation has to take notice. Like the entire industry of sports has to take notice if that happens. I watch a guy on Instagram I follow named Famous Los, right? So as I'm scrolling through Instagram after the game, Famous Los has a thing. He zooms in on Kendrick Nunn on his, Instagram or whatever. He's like, "Who is this man? This man has me going crazy." And he shows a couple seconds of the Heat game, and I'm like, okay, we have made it now to viral social media. If we beat Houston, and I don't know if we can say we. I don't know how much we.
You can. I can't. That's how that works, Chris. I caught myself. I almost did it at like 3 sentences ago, and I stopped myself. So yeah, I'm taking a different role, but not that different.
If the Heat are able to beat the Houston Rockets, it's impossible not to talk about them. And the thing that I think gives us a fighting chance is because sometimes the Heat can tempt you with stretches of very good defense, and then something happens and it crumbles. If our defensive game shows up and holds tight on Sunday, there's an opportunity there because James Harden can still get a super inefficient 30 points. Russell Westbrook can still go with a super crazy inefficient triple-double, and we can live in those inefficient gaps, if trends hold that have been established throughout the season so far. So I'm looking to see that, and if we play well, I think we can win this game. I'm not even going to try and hedge my bets. I'm so used to being a hedge my bets Miami Heat fan that I think we can win that game if our defense holds.
Well, we'll both be out there, and I do think they can win that game too. And I think part of the reason that they sat Justice Winslow with the back spasms tonight was to make sure he was ready for Sunday, because I think they figured without Trae Young, they could probably go up to Atlanta and get a win. Chris, where do people follow you?
On Instagram at ChampDaraw, DARAW, and on Twitter at ChampionLife, LYFE. You can find us in the Light Skin Opinions podcast. Check us out wherever you get your podcast, and on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's our Twitter handle too.
All right, maybe we'll do another podcast on Sunday. Again, follow 5reasonsports.com. And, we'll get to some of the Kendrick Nunn stuff that's probably going to come up here on future pods. I think it might be something you guys want to handle on LSO also. But for today, just basketball. And again, we'll get to all that. And personally, I kind of want to say something about it. But today, just focus on the Heat's win. 4-1 now after beating the Atlanta Hawks. Houston on Sunday, road trip coming up after that. Thanks for joining us.